It's a Final Four that few expected. Here we have arrived at Ole Miss and Miami, Oregon and Indiana. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the College Football Show Late Night, presented by FanDuel. And we will, of course, discuss the Final Four matchup and, of course, the transfer portal in effect. And in reviewing the transfer portal and these Final Four teams in college football, maybe a new world has arrived for the grand old sport. We got Matt Zemek, of course, here from Trojans Wire. You can catch Matt as well a couple times a week on USC at the Voice of College Football, breaking down USC, the Big Ten, and college football. Matt, how you doing tonight?
Doing okay. I mean, you said it. And we know the SEC and the Big Ten broadly and generally, have the resources and they're dominating football more broadly. The SEC getting 5 teams into the playoff and the Big Ten having, 3 teams that were, in the quarterfinals and now guaranteed to have 1 team in the national championship game for the 3rd straight year. But the specific schools, that is a picture of parity. So the conference imbalance is real. The Big 12 still failing to win a game. And, Miami's a legitimately strong team, but the ACC as a whole was weak. It's kind of like how it was with Clemson a decade ago. Clemson was a heavyweight, no question, but the conference as a whole wasn't really pulling its weight. So the conference imbalance is real. But in terms of, who's going to win the national championship, there's parity. There's real parity here. I mean, Ohio State turned out to be the best team, but, didn't dominate in the regular season, a year ago. And now we have, Indiana and Oregon have never won a national championship. Ole Miss, not since Johnny Vaught in the 60s. And Miami not in, nearly a quarter of a century. So this is new, this is different. And also let's consider the point that in one semifinal, we have a 6 seed versus a 10. Last year, we had a 6 versus a 7 and an 8 versus a 5. So for all the hand-wringing about the first round wasn't good, but it's the first round, right? It's not supposed to be the best. It's getting in the quarterfinals, getting in the semifinals. That's when the games are supposed to be bigger and they're supposed to be better. And not all of these quarterfinals were good. In fact, they were lopsided, but in most cases, Ole Miss, Georgia stole the show. But there was a lot of time spent on James Madison. It's not as though James Madison didn't deserve to have some discussion. It merited some, but we're not in the Alabama Clemson days where you enter a season and you think, well, just 2, maybe 3 teams maximum can win the national championship. No, we are in the NIL and transfer portal era. If people thought that was just going to make, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State automatically better than everyone else, it has not turned out that way. And I think that's good for college football. And there are problems with the playoff. We've documented them, Mark, you and I on our show. Good callers have said the same. But there are some things that are good. And with a 4-team playoff, you don't have Oregon having its chance in the semifinals. You definitely don't have Miami and Ole Miss. And they got their chance and they made the most of it. And we should welcome that. So there are lots of problems. I'm not sweeping them under the rug. I don't try and just, look the other way and pretend that problems don't exist. But there are some good things happening here, and we need to just be honest about that.
Some of the golden ages of any particular sport may have included 2 behemoths, the Celtics and the Lakers, the Cowboys and the 49ers, the Yankees and the Dodgers ascending to the top, and the anticipation of those 2 playing for all the marbles. However, maybe the playoffs leading up to those epic clashes were not the best because it was a given that we would wind up with those 2 playing. So while the overarching theme that's remembered decades later is that there were 2 great giants that would meet and collide and usually great stars of those two, Cowboys, Steelers, and we could go on and on with a few different examples, that maybe the playoffs were a foregone conclusion, as opposed to the uncertainty, the unpredictability of what we see now unfolding in college football, unlike what we've seen in a few decades. I was sitting there scratching my head as I was watching the semifinals unfold, or the quarterfinals unfold to get to the semis, Matt. I came up with this one real quick, as you would be able to as well. Ole Miss, Miami, and Indiana, the three that defeated Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. So the three that won those games going into this playoff, 12 years of college football playoff, 0 wins, nothing accomplished out of those three, defeated three schools that just since the playoff started in 2014 have 7 national championships and 21 college football playoff wins. They are the 3 highest college football playoff wins, with the 3 highest totals for championships. Bama with 3, Ohio State 2, Georgia 2, Bama 9 wins, Ohio State 7, Georgia 5. They are the 3 Goliaths after Clemson has descended during this 12-year run of the college football playoff, and knocked off by 3 schools with a combined 0 wins in the CFP coming into 2025.
Yeah, it's like in basketball, the 2023 Final Four. You had Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, and Miami, and like Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, all at home. It really is a kind of a similar parallel. And like, you want, right? If you're in any sport, you want to enter a season knowing that lots of different teams can win the championship, because it's not just a small collection of a handful of schools. Only they can realistically win. Like, that's healthy, right? Like, you want the Pittsburgh Pirates to have a shot at the NL wild card and maybe make a run at the World Series. Like, you don't just want the Dodgers and the Yankees to be spending $10 billion and winning the title every year. So, like, this is good for college football. Like, we have to underscore that. And there are certainly lots of problems, but having parity, having balance, like that is undeniably good and healthy. Like, do we remember 2015? Do we remember 2016? I mean, hey, Alabama and Clemson, they did play some great title games. Those 2015 and 2016 games, those were fantastic top shelf entertainment. But this reminds us that in the 4-team playoff, there were tons of blowouts. It's not as though the 12-team playoff introduced the opening game blowout. No, the 4-team playoff had tons of them. We remember Alabama beating Michigan State 38-0. That game was over midway second quarter. Clemson just taking Notre Dame and throwing it around like a dirty old rag. I mean, we had plenty of these. So again, people have short memories, need to think back a little bit to how it was 10 years ago. Like, that's not forever. College football is a 156-year-old sport. There are the flaws, there are the problems. Mark doesn't ignore them. I don't ignore them, but there is some good stuff, and that's what's in front of us right here.
Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We'll take those comments and questions. It is the late night college football show, the college football show here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. And if you check out those FanDuel odds, Miami a 3.5-point favorite against Ole Miss. 3.5 is also the spread with Indiana and Oregon. First time Indiana and Oregon got together at Autzen Stadium, 30-20, 50 points. Lo and behold, 46.5, I believe, is the over-under. We will check those in just a second. Both of those games are right around between 45 and 50 points, but we'll go and check the tote board here in just a second. And also, as we start to take your calls here, the other half of the storylines of college football right now taken up by the transfer portal, of course. Last count, 2,000, 2,500 players, something in that range going to the portal. Texas Tech obviously noted that they could not score in the college football playoffs, so they went out and got a quarterback in Brendan Sorsby of Cincinnati. And of course, Indiana will try to continue its it's beginning of possibly a burgeoning dynasty with Josh Hoover coming over for TCU to take over for Fernando Mendoza in 2026. Keep in mind that Matt and I are here for 60 minutes for you or more. If you would like us, please consider the Super Chat contributions here at the Voice of College Football, because we are here for you each and every night. Let's go to the lines. We've got Michael Hogue stopping by. Michael, what's going on?
I'm Matt, Mark. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
All right. I want to talk to you. I said this last week. You guys kept saying that the SEC was a premier conference, and I want to talk about how they said the last.
When did I ever say that? This is what I said. This is what I said repeatedly. This was brought up to me again today. I wasn't even on the air today. This was brought up to me today. Mark, you said the best. No, somebody else relayed this comment to me. Our buddy Chris Sadler, our operations manager here at the Voice of College Football, that somebody else, mentioned him. Yeah, Mark says the SEC is still the best conference. No. I said the SEC played the best during the regular season non-conference schedule, and that's all I could go by at that point.
Okay.
And then I would possibly make a revision based on bowl games and playoff games.
Okay.
That's
sorry.
what I said over and over and over.
Anyway, my question is, if you go the last 3 years and stuff like that, and you look at the records of the SEC and the Big Ten Conference,
yeah,
would you say that Big Ten is actually the premier conference now in college?
Well, you're going to recite those records for us, right, Michael? What are the records the last 3 years?
I would have to look, and I don't got that much time.
All right.
I don't have $150, Mark.
Well, that's beside the point, Michael. I thought you were coming with the numbers themselves. Are you talking about who won the national championship game? You're talking about who won the most games.
Most games.
Yeah, those are two different things. Those are two different things. We know who won the national championship. Yes, the Big Ten is gunning for a third consecutive national championship. We have no debate there at all. Mm-hmm. If we looked at the regular season and the bowl numbers, the postseason numbers, all of it put together, then it's really inconsequential. It's just not that much of a disparity between the SEC and the Big Ten in the last 3 years.
Okay. Second question is, I'm going to pick you guys' brains. What is the X factor going to be for Ole Miss, for Chambliss? Is he going to have to play lights out again like he did against Georgia, against Miami? And what does Carson Beck have to do?
I can jump on that one. I think that Miami, and we'll talk about these FanDuel lines in a little bit, but I think this is clearly Miami and Indiana should be considered the favorites in these semifinals. And I think the way to slice this up is Indiana is the best coach team, and Miami has the best talent, especially in the trenches, but really 1 through 22. Like Miami has the most dudes on the field. So Carson Beck, the thing about Carson Beck is Cristobal and the staff, Shannon Dawson, offensive coordinator, they've gotten through to him. And they've gotten through in the sense of don't make the mistake, let your defense win. You have 21 other really good football players surrounding you. You don't need to be the lead dog. You just need to be responsible with the ball. Run for 7 yards when you have the lane. Don't force anything down the field. He was not throwing anything over 12 yards. Like, he did not try to push the ball down the field at all against Ohio State. What did he do well? He made the 8-yard pass on 3rd and 5. He made just the simple routine play in the high leverage 3rd down type situation. It's exactly the way he should be playing, because he has Fletcher, he has Tony, and of course you have Reuben Bain and the rest of that game-wrecking defense. Just don't make mistakes and just make the routine plays, and we're going to be fine. And so credit to Cristobal. I've criticized Mario Cristobal plenty of times in the past. He's really put it all together. He's hitting all the right notes. He's getting through to all of his guys, but especially his quarterback, because his quarterbacks, plural, at Miami over the years have been undisciplined. And now we're seeing a really airtight operation. So as long as Carson Beck continues to play this responsible form of football, he doesn't need to light it up. He doesn't need to post huge numbers. Just don't make mistakes. Convert third and medium. That's really all, in my mind, Miami needs. Carson Beck just needs to not lose this game. And this really touches on a broader theme that involves Indiana, Oregon as well. This is not 2022. Remember 2022? The two playoff semifinals were absolute shootouts. TCU 51, Michigan 45, Georgia 42, Ohio State 41 in the Peach Bowl. And that was the year that was the 1 year Lincoln Riley's done really well at USC. You had all those shootouts in the Pac-12 that season. 2022 was a year when you had tons of points in big college football games. And the notion of sevens are better than threes, you need to go for it at every opportunity. That was the world we had back then. But now turn the page to this playoff. Dan Lanning, loves to go for it on fourth down, but if he had just been kicking field goals and putting them in the bank, Oregon would have put away Texas Tech a lot earlier than it did. And it took a defensive touchdown. Technically not a defensive touchdown, I know, but basically a fumble recovery at the 5, that's a defensive score essentially, not technically. But this whole idea of sevens are better than threes, well, but if the opposing offense can't do a lick, you should be kicking field goals. 9 points really matters when the opposing offense can't do anything. So I bring this up just to say this is not an offense-first sport anymore. Ole Miss Georgia was the exception, and that's why Trinidad Chambliss's performance was truly exceptional, and it's why he has to be exceptional for Ole Miss to have a realistic chance against Miami's 1 through 22 talent. But for the most part, we're not in 2022 anymore. This is now a defense-first sport, at least at the highest echelon. Indiana, Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma lost to Alabama, but still, Oklahoma got here because of defense. The Texas A&M Miami game, all defense. The Miami Ohio State game, dominated by defense. Oregon Texas Tech, dominated by defense. So the whole idea of, you have to get sevens. You can't settle for field goals. We're not really in that kind of spot right now. Field goals are actually okay if you're going to be in a street fight. So college football is in a very different space. That's one of the, we talk about Indiana beating Alabama and the SEC and the Big Ten, and there are all those stories. But to me, the macro level story, the really big overarching story of these quarterfinals, and Ole Miss Georgia was, again, the exception. But we're in a defense-first world right now. That's why Miami's favored to make the national title game. It's why Indiana is as well. So we need to make sure that, if you're going to be playing a shootout, of course you need to be going for it on fourth down. Of course you need to get touchdowns in the red zone. But in these contexts and in these games and these semifinals shape up as examples of them, field goals might be just fine. And we need to rethink the balance between being conservative and aggressive. If you just give me a generic scenario or you talk to me in a vacuum without context, I would say, yeah, you need to be aggressive and go for it. But we've had situations and we've had games in which, you shouldn't be going for it on fourth down all the time. Bank the 3 points. So a lot to consider going into these semifinals based on what we've just seen.
Last thing before I let you guys go. We know how fast Indiana can score. Is Laney going to have to go more sevens and threes because of how much Indiana can score and how fast they can score?
I don't think Indiana's going to be in any hurry to score. You saw how Indiana did it against Alabama. They're not taking shots downfield. A lot like Miami, right? They don't have to get the home run. They can just get 5 yards per play. 5-yard run, 6-yard pass. Mendoza scrambles for a little bit. That's Indiana's dominance, right? Indiana dominates without having to take risks.
Yeah,
it was Alabama and DeBoer who had to take that risk on fourth down, and as soon as they failed, tsunami. But Indiana wasn't, getting greedy. Indiana was just able to punch them in the mouth on a consistent basis. That is the ultimate in football dominance, right? What's coming. We're going to punch you in the mouth, and we dare you to stop us. And Alabama couldn't do that. So I don't think Indiana's going to be in a rush. And let's remind ourselves, they played in Autzen Stadium during the regular season. Mendoza threw a pick six to tie the game at 20. Indiana led 2013. He throws a pick six, but then Indiana got back to short percentage passing. I watched that game. I watched that go-ahead drive. It's precisely because Mendoza wasn't trying to push the ball down the field and get it all back at once. When Indiana keeps it manageable, keeps everything contained, that's when they function well, and they certainly displayed that style against Alabama.
Yeah, but also, did you watch during the game too on the two touch? Or I don't know how many times you guys see IU play this year. It seemed like they'll like lull you to sleep, and then boom, there goes like a 30 or 40-yard touchdown pass.
I mean, they ran it up on Illinois. They ran it up on some really bad teams, but for the most part, like they don't overextend.
Sure.
That's what I've seen.
20 points against Iowa. They had 13 until the final minute of play, 13 against Ohio State. They did put up 27 against Penn State, but they really had to work to do it. That's not a huge number. They only had like 10 points at some point in the fourth quarter, or 13 points in the fourth quarter at some point during that game. So the one thing I'll say, Michael, because you kind of alluded to the Ole Miss Miami matchup and some of the schematics, is obviously Miami is going to try to tee off on a much different quarterback or style quarterback, where Julian Sayin was basically a sitting duck. Of course, Trinidad Chambliss provided some of the craziest improvisational plays we're going to see. Only 2 or 3 guys in the nation can do that. Now he has to be able to, on the move, determine risk versus reward and not play like a complete fool, chicken with his head cut off kind of deal. But he is capable of doing some things that obviously the other quarterbacks can't do, that Miami has faced.
That is true. And I wish Thursday Friday would hurry up and get here.
Sit tight, Michael. We'll get there.
All right. Got you guys. Hey, Matt, you going to be on maybe later again this week if Mark lets you?
Friday.
Okay. I will see you guys. So
after
you both
the Peach Bowl.
So you'll both be on Friday night then together.
You will actually not see me on Friday, Michael.
All right. Have fun, Mark.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Have a good night, Michael. All right. Appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. It's a Monday night. We got Matt Zemek here. Of course, Trojans Wire is the place to catch Matt. And, of course, at the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. And it's a late night show here presented by FanDuel. And we'll check out those odds here in a few minutes. We got the Real MVP stopping by.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you two doing this evening?
Doing good.
Good. It's good to hear. Well, Matt, I just wanted to challenge some of your thinking because, I'm normally on the same wavelength, but I just see this completely differently than you. The first thing you said that I disagree with is Ohio State's not the best team in the country. There wasn't a single day where they were the best team in the country. The best team is Indiana. Indiana is so much better. There's a possibility Indiana.
Did I say Ohio State was the best team in the country?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Maybe it was just one of those things.
Doing that.
It stuck out to me, but it's one of those things where, you say something, you meant to think one thing, and you say another. Happens to me all the time. Who do you think's the best team? Let me ask you that. Just who do you think's the best team?
Indiana.
Okay. And is it by a wide margin?
Not a wide margin. I mean, Indiana was barely better than Ohio State, and Indiana plays a relatively conservative style. Oregon was not a blowout when they played. So, but Indiana is the best team right now.
That's fair. To me, there's a chance Indiana wins this thing going away. It's not going to be like going away and they're going to beat people by 28 points. They're just going to defensively struggle everyone to where I honestly don't know how like Miami or Ole Miss or even Oregon score more than 21 points against this Indiana defense. If Indiana gets to 21 or more in any of these matchups, it's over. Like, I honestly want to kind of give Indiana the trophy now. That's how much better I think they are than everyone else currently in this thing. If their name was Ohio State or Georgia or Oklahoma or Michigan, people would talk about this team as potentially the greatest team or the most proven team in the history of the sport.
Maybe. And real MVP, you know what? I might have said that Ohio State was the best team in the country back in November or maybe early December. And I was optimistic on Ohio State using the Indiana loss as fuel for a playoff run. Like I picked Ohio State in the bracket going in. So maybe that's what you were gathering. And on that part, I was obviously proved very wrong. In terms of Indiana relative to the field, and so, you know, against Oregon, you have a rematch. And in rematches, there's always just a natural motivational edge for the team that lost the first game. I go back to LSU Alabama 2012 BCS title game. You know, that game was in the Superdome. First meeting was in Tuscaloosa. Second meeting's in the Superdome. So you think, okay, even though LSU won the first game, and so Alabama has the revenge factor in its favor going into the rematch, it's the Superdome. And we know LSU was, you know, a killer in previous Superdome BCS national title games, the 2004 Sugar Bowl over Oklahoma, and then the 2008 game over Ohio State. So you're thinking, it's the Superdome. Les Miles and LSU, they don't lose there, but Alabama just went into New Orleans and did well. So just in terms of that natural motivational edge, Oregon has that, but the counterbalance is the first meeting was in Autzen. The first meeting was in the Pacific Northwest, and Indiana still handled that well. And the other thing, the real MVP, that does point to an Indiana win is that, you know, Oregon could not run the ball against Texas Tech's front seven. And if Oregon can't run the ball against Texas Tech, how's it going to run against Indiana? But I mean, I would expect that Oregon's going to really lean on the passing game in this one. And you know, there was discussion earlier about how Indiana's might try to score quickly. I don't agree with that. Oregon in this game needs to try to score quickly. Like, Oregon needs the big hit. Oregon needs the home run. Oregon is not going to go 14 plays, 80 yards in 7 minutes. Oregon needs splash plays to tilt the balance. And Dante Moore needs to have his best game of the season. And is that possible? Yes. Is it likely? Definitely not. Like, and we saw this in the Orange Bowl, that Dante Moore, he can be brilliant in short bursts and in specific moments, but over 60 minutes, he usually fills up the stat sheet with some mistakes. He usually commits a turnover at some point, usually slips up to some degree. Can't have that against Indiana. We would definitely agree on that. So I think it's going to be close because Oregon, you know, got thoroughly beaten at home. Dan Lanning's going to have an easy sell to his team in terms of motivation. Also, like, their receivers have been hurt for much of the year. They got back into action in the Orange Bowl, but there was definitely some rust. There was definitely some inconsistency. I think Oregon probably plays better than it did on offense against Texas Tech, but that's a low bar, right? And Oregon's going to need to raise the bar really high, and it's going to be hard against Indiana's well-schooled defense, which, you know, we all saw it. Alabama has these big hulking offensive linemen. Didn't matter because Indiana is so technique sound. It's just so well-schooled in terms of shooting gaps, slanting, twisting, and like, you know, teams with first-round buys in these first 2 years of the 12-team playoff are 1-7. What's the one? Cignetti. Like, Cignetti just –
yeah, he's the best
can't
coach
say enough about the job he's doing. He has his team so well drilled. Like, he is just lapping the field in terms of the level of coaching he provides. So in many ways, it comes down to that. I can't bet against Cignetti, right? In this kind of situation.
To me, Kirk Cignetti's got this Nick Saban quality to where I honestly believe at every possession they're treating the game at 0-0. They could be up by 50 and it's still 0-0. And so I don't think any of this, this is a rematch, and I think Indiana's got the mental edge, the physical edge. I think they've got every edge imaginable in terms of that department because they got a coach who, if I'm the Cleveland Browns today because they fired their coach, I would give him like $20-30 million and say, you do whatever you want to my team. That's how good of a coach he is.
You know, I I mean, I love seeing what Cignetti's doing at Indiana. It's one of the great rags to riches stories in sports, let alone college football. But I won't lie, Daryl, I would love to see Cignetti with the Browns. And like it just for the sake of hypothetical. We know it's not going to happen, but just putting it out there. If we lived in a world where Curt Cignetti took over the Browns and he got them to the Super Bowl, just hypothetically, Curt Cignetti would have a claim to being the best football coach ever in the history of the world, the whole planet, if he did that. So, like, just for that reason, it would be fun to see Cignetti with the Browns. But we know he's not going anywhere. He just got Marsh. He just got, as Mark alluded to, Josh Hoover. Indiana's going to get dudes, and giving Cignetti dudes, like, that is bad news for the rest of the Big Ten. That's for sure.
No, it's bad news not for the rest of the Big Ten. It's bad news for the rest of the sport. Indiana, to me, is this new Clemson team. Every decade, there's this team that for 5 to 7 years pops up. Indiana's that team for me. Like, until Curt Cignetti leaves or until they fall off for whatever reason, I'm just going to put them in the top 5 every year. They're that good of a team, and they're good. I trust them that much now. And maybe
okay, but you know what? But that's bad for the sport. Like, I love the idea of a nobody suddenly becoming a somebody. Like, I think it would be great for baseball if the Pittsburgh Pirates won a couple World Series. Like, that would be great to me. So fun. Indiana being a dominant college football team is in the same category.
Yeah, but people get tired of winners, even if they're lovable losers. If they win too much too quickly, people like to see slow growth, then win one, then fall back down, and then somebody else get their turn. And to me, this is something else I wanted to address is I haven't seen really the success of the 12-team playoffs of like growing the game or helping out the game. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw the TV ratings from Ross Dellinger, what he said. Oregon, Texas Tech got about 3 less million viewership than Ohio State, Michigan. And then the Ole Miss, Georgia game got about the same ratings as Ohio State, Michigan. And to me, your sport's not doing well if a postseason game is being outdrawn by a regular season matchup.
Well, this is the trade-off for parity. Parity with non-traditional teams in these games. And, Ole Miss, Georgia, that was a rematch. I'm sure that took a little bit of the sting out of that. Also, if Lane Kiffin's coaching in that, TV numbers might have been a little bit different there. But, Texas Tech, Oregon, like those are not blue bloods. It's a noon game. And let's remember, that first game is now at noon Eastern because they're trying to expand the schedule, having a 4-hour window, and the 4-hour windows were the product of ASU Texas going into overtime. They had to expand the game windows from 3.5 hours to 4 hours this season. So, those are a lot of details. Like, that is the trade-off for not having blue blood versus blue blood in some of these games. But overall, I mean, just the fact that you wouldn't have Miami, Ole Miss, or Oregon, they wouldn't be in the semifinals if you had just a 4-team playoff. So again, the 12-team playoff is still democratizing the sport to a certain degree, and that's healthy.
I agree, but I guess that's where I just disagree with you. I don't know if that's good for the sport. I'm going to make a prediction that neither of these games will get as many TV viewership as the Alabama-Indiana Rose Bowl. I think people have imparted the schedule as well, have already moved on to the NFL wildcard game. Like,
that might be true, but I mean, TV ratings are not the sole measurement of how healthy a sport is.
That's true, but I do think it is an indication of how well it's doing. Like, I mean, we could talk about the bowl games and how there's not many fans in the stands or like people opting out and stuff as well. I saw like there's double-digit players opted out of every single one of these games because of the transfer portal. Like, how do you even judge who's the legitimate national championship if 10-plus players are missing from each of these teams?
From the semifinal teams?
Yes.
Well, who are there significant player absences in going into these semifinals? I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember where I saw it for, but I
Okay.
saw that there's double-digit 10 plus players from each of these teams have left and entered the transfer portal already because they're focused on themselves and their own careers.
Yeah, but we haven't seen anyone of significance. And I'm not talking about stars. We have not seen, unless somebody can pluck a name or two and put it in the chat. I've looked at this a little bit and I've not seen anybody of significance. And I'm talking about starting players involved.
Yeah, but it's still not a good sign for the sport
Well,
of.
it's not a good sign. I would also say, as you mentioned, the bowl games, and we've shoveled a lot of dirt on the bowl games. I saw very positive TV ratings concerning some of the better bowl matchups, like Tennessee, Illinois, Georgia Tech, BYU. I'll have to pull them at some point, but I saw bowl numbers that were better than anything we've seen in like 5 years.
Yeah, I saw the Pop-Tart Bowl. I think it did 8.7 million people watching that. But I don't know how much of that's because it's a bowl game or that's just a Saturday with college football or,
It's in the same time slot as the bowl games have been every year. So it's all the above. It's a bowl game and it's holidays and it's football and it's tradition and it's a decent matchup.
That's fair. That's fair.
Daryl, let me step in here in terms of what's good for the sport. It really hit me watching these quarterfinal games, and like Dan Lanning before the Orange Bowl said, you know what, this game should be in Lubbock. It should be on campus. And when I follow people on social media, like journalists, not just fans, but commentators, people paid to comment on college football, the prevailing sentiment I see from a lot of people who cover this sport is that the first 2 rounds, a lot of talking heads are saying the first 2 rounds should be on campus. But it hit me that, you know what, it's backwards. What we should actually do in college football is have the first 2 rounds be bowl games. And then the semifinals and the title game should be on campus. That's how it should be done. And the concept is actually pretty simple. Like the first 2 rounds, that's 8, and if you go to 16 teams, you're adding a couple more first round games. So that's even more inventory for the bowls. The first 2 rounds, you have the various bowl games. Obviously, the quarterfinals would be the more prestigious, quote unquote, New Year's Day bowl games. And in terms of like accommodating fans who want to travel, you would do what the NCAA tournament does, the pod system where teams in their regions among the top 4 seeds, they get placed close to home. If you're not in one of the top 4 seeds, then you have to travel across the country. So just like a hypothetical example here. Let's say Oregon is a top 4 seed. Oregon would play a first round game in the Holiday Bowl, and it would play a quarterfinal in the Rose Bowl. So Oregon fans aren't traveling to Miami. They aren't traveling to Atlanta. They're able to travel close to home. So it would be a similar principle for teams in the Midwest, teams in the East, teams in the South, so on and so forth. But the whole concept would be, these bowl games that might struggle to attract an elite matchup or would be vulnerable to opt-outs, by shoehorning those December and then New Year's Day bowl games into the first round and the quarterfinals, you are giving a number of bowls, maybe not the New Year's bowls, but certainly like those second or third tier bowls, you instantly make them relevant again. But then you put the semifinals and the final at the campus site to reward the teams that survived and the teams that are the highest seeds going into the semifinals. So that seems to be the way to both improve the product of the playoff, but also save the bowl system. And the reason why I think you should do it this way rather than the other way, we're having first 2 rounds on campus and then the semis and finals as the major bowl games. You do it this way because people have said, if you have the first 2 rounds on campus, the quarterfinals become on campus, that basically means that one, if not more, of the New Year's Day bowl games are not hosting a playoff game. And so that could kill off the Rose Bowl. And some people directly told me on social media during these quarterfinal games, you know what? College football is so far gone that if we have to kill off the Rose Bowl to improve the playoff and get some on-campus games in the quarterfinals, that's fine. Well, to me, I don't think that's fine. I think that the idea of the Rose Bowl dying is sacrilege. And so for that reason, I think that having the first 2 rounds with all of the major bowl games and then the several second tier bowls that might be able to rotate each year so that each of those bowls gets in on the fun every few years. I think that's the better way to do it than to say, have all on-campus games through the quarterfinals and then just have your final 3 games at the major bowl sites.
I'm going to be a little hypocritical here, knowing that the original setup of the Rose Bowl was not Pac-10 or Pac-8 and Big Ten centric at the time. So we think of that as tradition, but the Rose Bowl was played for decades without those 2 conferences involved. But obviously, being a child of the 70s and 80s and onward, that's what I hold near and dear. And ever since those ties to those 2 conferences was broken down, even going all the way back to the BCS, and to watch an Oklahoma-Washington State Rose Bowl in 2003 about turned my stomach. But I've gotten used to it to a certain extent. But the Rose Bowl to me will never be the same without the Big Ten taking on the Pac-10. Now, what's interesting about your concept is it also takes us back in time to a day gone by that none of us watched, and that's NFL championship games prior to the Super Bowl being played on home fields of usually, especially the way the base location geography of the NFL was at the times, almost the entire sport was played in the North. And so you had NFL championship games in Cleveland and Green Bay and Yankee Stadium and places like that. And that could come back to the sport. And that would be interesting with obviously a late January game as a college football championship game being played in, I don't know, Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Seattle or Columbus.
Yeah, I think it would be fun. I'm at the point where the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta, they're not bowl games to me anymore. They're just playoff games. I mean, people even don't escape. I don't even remember who was in the Rose Bowl 2 years ago because they're all playoff games. So I honestly think, and I think your idea is better than my idea, I would just be happy if you just move the Rose Bowl to whichever Big Ten campus has it and just replace their logo with the Rose Bowl, because it's dead. It's just dead. The tradition died when the Pac-10 died officially for me as well.
That's where I'm at with the Rose Bowl. It means nothing to me anymore, especially when they put that playoff game moniker on it. Those are playoff games to me. And again, I'm just speaking for me. Not everyone has to feel like this. And I didn't even try to feel like this. It just kind of naturally happened, just like a lot of rivalries don't mean as much to me as they did because of the expanded field. But when certainly it hit, and I know that this is a complete aberration, but in the 2020 season, when we watched Alabama and Notre Dame playing the Rose Bowl at Cowboys Stadium, it was like, okay, you put a rose on the field at Cowboys Stadium. What in the world are we doing here?
Yeah, the bowl game system, I think, and I understand why the traditionalists, and even I, as somebody who this was just inevitably going to happen when you expand the playoffs to 12, 16, 24, is I don't think accommodating the bowl system is realistic anymore. I think it's just a bygone era, similar to the Southwest Conference in the Pac-10, or all these conferences like the Airplane Conference. Just something that's just going to be remembered back. Hey, you remember 50, 60 years ago when we had these bowl games played at this location? I think we just need to move forward, except, hey, you all are in the playoffs, or if you want to keep the bowl games, I guess you can have the Rose Bowl between 2, 8, and 4 teams if you really want to keep it alive, just for the sake of doing it. But that's all I've got to say. Have a great rest of your show. And congrats to Indiana for winning the national championship and having the greatest season in the history of college football. I mean, Indiana having the greatest season in the history of college football. Who could have said that 3 years ago?
Thanks to Real. All right, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's check out these FanDuel odds, and we will remind you that the late night show here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel, Canes and the Rebels, of course, getting together, and Miami's a 3.5-point favorite. Our over/under stands at 51.5. Oregon, Indiana posted 50 points at Autzen Stadium. It's a 46.5 over/under in Atlanta. With the Hoosiers, a 3.5-point favorite, 7.5-point underdog against Oregon the first time around. Trey stopping by. Trey, we appreciate you being here. What's going on tonight?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Matt and Mark. It's been good today. I didn't feel very good today, but I still made it here.
Good to have you here.
Yes, sir. So we're going to talk about the comment about the NFL playoffs for a minute. I'm like, let's be honest. Green Bay is a tough place to play in the playoffs. We all know that. And Bills Mafia too. So I can't wait to see that now. I'm glad you brought that up about Lambeau. I'm a Packer fan.
Yeah,
undefeated. Green Bay's not hosting any games.
Oh, no. I feel bad because I switched up and my girlfriend was like, I thought you was a Packer. I was. She's like, what happened? I went with the Chicago. I couldn't stop liking Chicago this year because they were underdogs and they really impressed me. So I'm a Bear this week. So
yes,
anyway,
undefeated in the postseason for a long, long time, decades. I think Michael Vick was the first to go in there and win a playoff game.
Yeah, I love Michael Vick. That was a good playoff game. One of my favorites in the wild card. But I'm going to break this down with the Indiana and Oregon game. Do you know what makes Indiana defense so special? They play a basic defense, a cover 3, man-to-man, and nobody can really stop it because they have a great front four. They can cover it, and they'll come straight at you. And the big question is, can Oregon be balanced enough and take that heat off of Moore? Because their running game has been atrocious, especially the last month. I looked at their stats and 36 yards, 140 yards, and back to 36 yards. They got to do something about that running game to take that pressure off of Moore because they ain't going to go nowhere. It's going to be just as the first time.
Yeah, so I remember you're making me recall I know it's an NFL game, not a college football game, but there was an NFL game about just over 20 years ago. Basically, the last time Miami was relevant before this year. Also, there was 2017 under Mark Richt, but that's when Miami was still Miami. There was a game over 20 years ago. It was 2002, 2003. Rich Gannon of the Raiders. He threw like over 60 passes. But they were like checkdowns, like just tons of checkdowns, tons of dump offs, really high percentage passes. But he threw a ton of them. Bill Callahan had him just throwing tons of short passes because the Raiders just didn't want to run on the Steelers. Like they knew that the Steelers defensive line was going to stuff the run, and so Rich Gannon just kept throwing short, little safe passes the whole game basically. I think Oregon's going to need to do something akin to that because Oregon kept trying to ram it up the middle against Texas Tech. Kept trying.
And God,
those were wasted plays, right? I think Oregon has to be really, really stubborn with the pass. But this brings up a point about play selection. People get wrapped up into run versus pass, but runs can be aggressive, passes can be conservative. Like a dump off pass, a swing pass, a check down. It's like an extended handoff. It's like a running play. It isn't going to go in the score sheet as a running play, but it can be conservative. It can be safe. But I just think Dante Moore should be throwing about 50 short pass. Well, he should be throwing around 50 passes in this game, 40 of them safe, and then he'll need to take 10 shots down the field. But for Oregon to go into this game thinking, hey, we can just ram it up the gut, that's not likely to work. So Oregon's at the very least, Oregon has to throw first to set up the run second. Oregon can't go into this game thinking, oh, well, let's try and get it right this time on the ground. No, because then you're going to be in 3rd and 8. And we all saw how well it worked out for Alabama when Ty Simpson was in 3rd and 8. And people can say Dante Moore is better than Ty Simpson, fine, but like you're not going to beat Indiana in 3rd and 8. You need to be thinking aggressive on 1st and 10, and really you need to be throwing the ball primarily to then set up the run later if you can. So Oregon's just going to need to throw the ball a lot, and we'll see if Dan Lanning is ready and willing to have that kind of game plan in the Peach Bowl.
To keep up our NFL analogies, of course, the pass is a handoff first introduced by Hank Stram and pretty much perfected by Bill Walsh. Those were the guys that obviously introduced the running game into the pass game and throwing to the running backs in the flat, considering, okay, a light's gone off. Our best runners are these running backs. How do we get them the ball in space? We can't get them going because they're constantly, slamming into these backs of these offensive linemen getting pushed in their lap. So, yeah, toss it out there to them.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Mark, because who did Bill Walsh coach? He coached Joe Montana and Jerry Rice, the best duo, period. And you said Matt Rich Gannon Kopp. I love that guy. I love Rich Gannon. So I'm glad y'all. Yeah, Mark's smiling. I'm all about NFL. So, but
your buddy John Gruden loved Rich Gannon too. He was a big Rich Gannon fan.
Oh yeah, I know.
Throwing him 5 picks.
Well, yeah, that was not good. You know how that is. I love John Gruden. I'm a big guy. I'm still rooting for him. I hope he gets hired sometime soon. But if you look at the other way of this Indiana and Oregon, if you look at Oregon, can they protect against this big line? I mean, they had a little issue in the first game. If they can buy them a little bit of time, they are vulnerable to give up some big space plays. Ohio State kind of creeped that in more than anybody else this year, and they exposed them a little bit, not very much. And when I mean expose them, is not all over the place like 20 times you're going down the field, throwing some big gains. They did it 2 or 3 times, and they caught up to it and made some adjustments in the second half and totally shut that down. But can they get things in space and see how they respond?
Well, what comes to mind when Matt was breaking down Oregon's approach against Texas Tech, and then also thinking back to the first matchup against Indiana, and maybe this was a little Dan Lanning arrogance that we're 8 to 10 points better. We're at home. We don't have to do anything special. And if you look at the numbers, and I presented you stats nerds, I did a complete breakdown, Ole Miss and Miami, all the national rankings, common opponents breakdown, all the statistical breakdowns, also went into the PFF matchups between the two teams, both individual and units, did the same thing coming with Indiana and Oregon. And you just see Oregon was able to run on everyone. They had the best yards per carry in the nation. They had a great rushing attack this season, but not against Indiana. And then against the number 1 rush defense in the nation, Texas Tech, they couldn't do it anymore. And then when you are constantly trying to slam the ball into the line and not doing anything exotic or creative to get your playmakers open, the other portion of that is, yes, what Matt was talking about, 3rd and 8 plus Dante Moore sitting back in a pocket as a bit of a sitting duck. Not that he's not capable of escaping, but he's not Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, and Indiana teed off on like 7 sacks in that game. Yeah.
So, I think they got to do some speed option, not the quarterback, running the football, because Dante Moore didn't, like you said, is not a very good runner. He is not. So get them in space, do some screens and dump offs like Matt said. But on the other side of it, can Oregon defense put the pressure on Mendoza? I don't think a lot of people did it this year. Not like Ohio State. Ohio State got them a couple of times. And once they caught on to it, and they were not selling the blitz out as much, in my view. They didn't blitz as much as they should have. Unless they got really good guarded, and they got that. If they blitz, they better have every 5 man covered, because they will make you pay for it for sure. They got the weapons on the wide receivers to really make you pay.
Well, Trey, we appreciate you being here. We want to respect our next caller who's been waiting for quite some time, but appreciate you calling. Of course, we're going to be here every night.
All right. Thank you. God bless everybody.
Thanks, Trey.
Thank you.
We keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, the late night college football show here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. Catch Matt's work at Trojans Wire. Also, I apologize, Matt. I lose track of these days and times. The USC show this week.
Tuesday
is the USC show with Matt. So catch Matt and the crew there. I believe that's at 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific on Tuesday night. So just one night from tonight, catch Matt talking USC, and I'm sure they'll dive into the playoffs as well and the transfer portal. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got Anthony on the line.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Matt. I feel I've talked to people who bet, like I have friends who are not fans of either team, and they feel that the odds, and they gamble. They feel the odds for Miami is kind of disrespectful, and they feel it's more that the odds in Vegas are giving a fair shot to Ole Miss because they're an SEC team and stuff like that. And it's like they don't watch any of Miami's games where they shut down a lot of mobile quarterbacks this year and stuff. If you actually watch Miami's games,
let's talk about these FanDuel lines, and before we say, well, it's Vegas, not respecting Miami or giving too much credence to the SEC. Let's keep in mind, like it's been several days since these matchups were decided, right? So the public's had several days to bet on these games, and I noticed that Indiana opened as a 4.5-point favorite, and that line has been bet down to 3.5. Indiana was at minus 190 money line. That's been bet down to, as you can see on the FanDuel odds, 176. And the Miami line, that's been holding steady for 5 days. That matchup was in place, or I should say 4 days. So that matchup was in place, New Year's night when Ole Miss won. And so in 4 days, there hasn't been any line movement. That line has held at 3.5, and the money line around 160, 165, that has held pretty steady as well. So you can say that Vegas might have set the odds incorrectly or in a weird spot, but the public is not necessarily on the Miami train, and I do find that interesting, and I'll mention why. The Ole Miss coaching situation. It is so fluid. It's so uncertain. Who's joining Lane Kiffin at LSU, who's staying on. Like, that's just regardless of how many people are there at the Fiesta Bowl on Thursday for Ole Miss, like that can't help with your game preparation, right? That has to be a distraction. Whereas Miami has a fully locked in staff. You don't have any questions. And I would say, again, Cristobal is coaching the best he's ever coached. His coordinators are absolutely nailing it. So I'm really surprised that when we look at these FanDuel lines that Miami has not risen at all over the week, that it's been very stable. Maybe you'll see some late money coming in on Miami, but I just think the stability of the coaching situation, that is a big check mark in Miami's favor.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just crazy to think that just hours after that victory over Georgia, that we're reading all sorts of indecision and not preparedness of having previous agreements of where we would stand. I don't know if there was just an assumption by one side that Ole Miss was going to lose this game so that they didn't need to even come up with any kind of contingencies. But it's just a travesty in this sport that we've got a group of players that have achieved this kind of season. They're sitting here now at 13-1, playing a semifinal game in the college football playoff, and they don't have a coaching staff that is committed to them. And I'm not talking about the individual coaches not doing their best or being committed, but they certainly have divided allegiances, divided time, and there's uncertainty that shouldn't be there. It's just a mess. We appreciate Anthony calling. Anthony got kicked out, said that he'd like to jump back in. I got the link there for you, Anthony, if you want to finish up your call. You know, I tend to be leaning toward both favorites covering at this point, but I don't think that the lines are unjustified. I don't think they're out of kilter too much. If anything, I would have expected maybe Indiana to be a slightly heavier favorite, but Vegas rarely is moved considerably by a previous game. Like, they're not going to react to Indiana, for example, beating Alabama by 35 points and just jump to a 10-point line because Indiana did this the last time out. So that's to be considered.
I was thinking, Mark, that Indiana was going to be a 4.5, 5-point favorite, and I thought Miami would be 5.5, 6. So like I thought Miami was going to be a much more solid favorite than what we're seeing. So that was just my initial thought. So it's just interesting to see, the public money moving to Oregon a little bit, and Miami not really getting a big surge. But I think I have the feeling that if as stories about Ole Miss's coaching situation persist, you might see some late money coming in on Miami, and it might be 4.5 when we get to kickoff time on Thursday.
Especially considering that Ohio State, according to the odds, was going to be a favorite against anybody they played. And obviously Miami was able to pull off the 10-point win, a double-digit win against the favorite in the field. All right, folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. My thanks to Matt for joining us here on a Monday night. Matt will be back here on Friday night, and Matt knows that he is welcome all the time, but he's plenty busy over on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. And again, you can catch Matt's work, of course, on Trojans Wire every day. What in particular are you focusing on there on Trojans Wire?
Transfer portal, defensive coordinator search, and where Pete Carroll goes from here after being fired from the Raiders. Those are definitely the things that we're talking about at Trojans Wire. So Pete Carroll, defensive coordinator search, a rumor that Pete Kwiatkowski is on Stanford's radar, that Andrew Luck is trying to make a play for him. So, where does USC go if Kwiatkowski goes to Stanford? And then transfer portal, that's, of course, all the rage. Some speculation that Husan Longstreet, the backup quarterback to Jaden Mayava, he's thinking about entering, and his brother, Kevin Longstreet, did enter the portal. So, that does raise the odds that Husan Longstreet is headed out. So plenty for us to talk about it at the USC channel Tuesday night.
And we will certainly delve more into the transfer portal comings and goings here on the late night show over the course of the next few nights. We want to honor Anthony's question here since he was not able to get back online. So here we go. Anthony says, Mark, do you guys feel like Miami is still getting overlooked because the nation that they still got lucky to get in the playoff? That's why the line isn't that high. My initial thought is certainly Mario Cristobal, not a strong reputation as a game-ready coach coming into this playoff. Miami having not been exposed to, let alone risen to the occasion in big games in forever, and none of these kids on the field have proven anything. And again, this is leading into the playoff. So those are my initial thoughts. And of course, the ACC disrespected, and rightfully so for the most part, as a weak conference, and that Miami really hasn't. And again, this is all pre-playoff, had not defeated a good team since the Notre Dame game. And that was way back in August. So going into the playoff, I certainly understood all the doubts about Miami football being a talented roster, but maybe not primetime ready. But at this stage, I don't think that anyone that follows college football, that knows college football and really understands sports, period, would be doubting this outfit.
Yeah, so I'm sold on Miami. I would be taking Miami minus the 3.5. I'd be taking Miami minus 5.5. Like, I think Miami's going to beat Ole Miss by at least a touchdown. I don't know what my final margin is, but like, it's at least a touchdown. In terms of why this line is lower, I think there's a reasonable thought process, and that is that Trinidad Chambliss is showing so much more at quarterback than what we saw from Marcel Reed of Texas A&M, and also from Julian Sayin, who, deer in the headlights. That was a clunker for Sayin, and Sayin is still at the early in his evolutionary arc. He's going to be better. He's going to be expected to be better next season, but like, this was a game that he was just not ready for. So Trinidad Chambliss, much more looks the part of a quarterback who can really do something against Miami's defense. And you could also make the argument that just Trinidad Chambliss is playing at a higher level than Carson Beck. Not that Carson Beck's playing poorly. Again, Cristobal is coaching up Beck superbly. Beck is doing exactly what he should be doing to help Miami win these playoff games. So, like, high marks to Beck. But what Trinidad Chambliss did against Kirby Smart in Georgia, that was, of course, spectacular. So it's not a criticism of Beck. It's just that Chambliss is setting the bar really high. I think that would be the most legitimate explanation for why this line is where it is and why the public money hasn't been flowing to Miami just yet.
About 50 watching here on YouTube, about 150 total with the folks on X. So if you're watching us on X, we appreciate that you're able to catch us and found us here at the Voice of College Football. But of course, join us on YouTube where you can join in the chat. And please, everyone, do us a favor and hit the like button on the way out and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Catch Matt's work at Trojans Wire as well. Matt, it's always a great time having you here, of course, to provide more insight. And we will see you on Friday night. And everybody enjoy the football, of course, coming up. You will see me next on Michigan Podcast. That's recorded on Tuesday afternoon. The Iowa Show with Corey Bratta at 5 Eastern. And we get a Big Ten Live show. And I'll probably just merge that right into the late night show on Tuesday night. So we'll see you back here at 6 p.m. Eastern time.